So with all this talk about the Vancouver Canucks and the prospects they can draft in the 2026 NHL Draft, I wanted to take a little bit of a blast to the past and talk about instead the potential of a guy that was taken in the draft last year. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about Braeden Cootes because it turns out this guy might actually be way better than any of us would have anticipated. I'll tell you why in just a sec. Braeden Cootes is 19 years old, 6 feet 185, a right-handed center right wing, a guy that became the very first 18-year-old to make the Vancouver Canucks opening night roster in gosh darn freaking 30 years. There were some guys that played their draft plus 1 year with Vancouver. Ryan Kessler comes to mind. There were some others that ended up making a late impact in their season. But when it came to opening night lineups, nobody had done it since gosh darn Peter Nedved in the 90s. So Braeden Cootes, hats off to you. He was the first player to do that in all that time. He had 3 games with the Canucks this season. 0 points, but the fact that he even made the team in the first place was extraordinary. And if you had been paying attention to the preseason games and the prospect showcase games that we had seen, there was ample reason to just see Braeden Cootes as an option for the Canucks on the team. He was so good, so dominant. That dominance did not carry itself into the regular season, but that's okay. Braeden Cootes, however, ended up going back to the WHL shortly after that 3-game stint. He had 23 points in 17 games with the Thunderbirds, and then he posted up 40 points in 28 games with the Prince Albert Raiders since getting traded over there. Add to that 6 points in 5 playoff games, and you now have yourselves a profile for a guy that's looking way better than it did last year. But hey, Lego, what are you talking about? I mean, 6 points in 5 games, that's not the best. It's fine. It's over a point per game. This guy was a first-round prospect. He made the NHL. He should be producing more than that. Okay, that's fair. You can say that the numbers themselves may not stand out in the best way possible when you just look at the goals and the assists. Heck, the Ruck twins are eligible for the draft this year, and they're both 100-point scorers. Braeden Cootes got 63 points on the year. But with that said, I wanted to dive into what was posted about in regards to Braeden Cootes from Tape to Tape Prospects. It's Hockey Prospects Analytics brought to you by Ryan Ma, Sod Scouting, and James Connolly. They post their profiles and their player cards on Twitter sometimes, and they did the Tape to Tape Tuesday player requests earlier yesterday, where you saw Hamalytics reply saying they wanted to see a Braeden Cootes scouting profile. This is where things get very, very interesting. Tape to Tape Prospects said, what can't Braeden Cootes do at the WHL level? Traded mid-season to Prince Albert, he has been their best forward. Watch for Cootes to make the jump to pro hockey next year, hopefully in the NHL. Now, I'll just say this right here before we actually dive into this very positive player prospect card. Braeden Cootes could actually go to the AHL, right? There's that new rule that allows NHL teams one 19-year-old to play in the American Hockey League. If Braeden Cootes were to play there, then I think that that's the best stage for his development. Because when you take a look at some of these advanced analytics for Braeden Cootes, he has been given a Prospect League grade of an A+. His involvement score is a 98th percentile in total. His efficiency score is a 95th percentile in total. And when you take a look at some of the WHL impact comparables he has, there are some very, very talented names over here. The top names that he is compared to are Logan Stankoven, Berkeley Catton, Nate Danielson, Brad Lambert, and Dylan Genther. Now, all of these guys over here have some sort of super positive trait that you can hang their hat on. Logan Stankoven is a monster for Carolina. Berkeley Catton was a very top-of-the-line prospect. Nate Danielson, same thing, top 10 guy. Brad Lambert was supposed to be a first, second, third overall caliber player, but he ended up slipping a lot more. And then you have Dylan Genther, who is by far the best NHL player out of all these guys, but he also is one of the oldest compared to the rest of the names on this list. Guenther is an absolute madman. He is so good, and I know a lot of Canucks fans have some PTSD about the fact that Guenther was drafted using Vancouver's pick. But hey, I'm not saying that Braeden Cootes is necessarily Guenther. They play very different styles, but impact-wise, you can say they have a similar level. Meanwhile, you talk about deployment comparables, there are some other guys here. I mean, none of these guys are super amazing. I mean, Tanner Howe, it's funny because he has the last name Howe, so there's that. But going back over onto the Twitter thread, there were some other posts made by Ryan Moss Scouting specifically that I also wanted to dive into as well. There's lots of talk from Canucks fans saying that they need to draft a top-line center, but Braeden Cootes looks pretty darn good to me. His WHL comparisons on our prospect model are Berkeley Catton, Guenther, Stankoven, Danielson, and Lambert. Top reply says he's good, but if the Canucks want to be cup contenders, they'll need a center to go against the McKinnons, McDavids, Draisaitl's, etc. You need elite centers. I think that's true if you don't have a Norris-level defenseman or a Hart-level winger. If Coots can be a fringe top 20 center in the NHL, and say Gavin McKenna can be that true franchise winger, do you need a franchise C per se? Their main overall point is that Coots is probably good enough where even if Vancouver falls in the lottery, they don't need to feel like they have to take Caleb Malhotra or Tynan Lawrence if they're not sold on them, and should be comfortable taking best player available instead. Another reply says, yes, you need a franchise C to win a cup, and another reply says they need a franchise winger and a franchise center. Oh man, this conversation would have just been so much easier if Elias Pettersson was good, right? I mean, I think that's the biggest conclusion you can take out of all of this. Also, I'm thinking back in the day, like, NHL teams that have won cups without a truly bona fide franchise center. Barkov, franchise center. Ryan O'Reilly in that 2019 year, franchise center. You had some franchise wingers and franchise defensemen and a franchise goalie in Tampa Bay, not to mention Steven Stamkos, who was absent for most of that 2020 Cup. Yeah, I can kind of see the point, honestly. If you have a franchise D in Hedman, Kucherov in the winger spot, and then Vasilevsky in net, you can kind of get away without having Stamkos, but then again, that's apples to oranges. Another reply says, I think that Braeden Cootes is more of a Bo Horvat type profile. Really solid two-way game and a workhorse, excellent 2C. You never know though. This kid has some insane work ethic, and I'm excited to see just how high he can push his ceiling. Ma says, I had him in my top 10 in stretches last year before I let consensus rankings bully me into putting him lower. This was the general point I had. I think if he is Horvat and you find a star winger to play with him, you don't need to spend a ton of effort hunting for that elite 1C. Good take, they say. Another reply says he's a 2C at best, maybe has the potential to grow into a 1C, but it's likely to take several years. He is more of a Horvat profile, which is a huge win, to be clear. And then another says he is Dylan Larkin 2.0. I think what a lot of fans are just agreeing on for the most part is that Braeden Cootes projects as a very, very solid second-line center, who can play first line if you really need him to. If your number one guy is injured or out for a stretch of time, Braeden Cootes is not a bad replacement up front. We've seen what hard work ethic can do in Vancouver, and we've seen guys that came out of nowhere to play first-line center actually excel. I'm looking at you, P.S. Suter. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Braeden Cootes at some point plays some first-line center games in Vancouver colors over the next few years. The question is, though, if he is the best option they have at center long-term, where does that take them? And if that is an issue, do the Vancouver Canucks, let's say they slip to third overall in this year's draft, do they try to remedy that by taking a Caleb Malhotra or a Tynan Lawrence? Is Braeden Cootes a good enough center to say, yeah, we can just draft on the wings or on D or whatever because we have this guy down the middle? More is better, though, right? So, I don't know. You can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How good is Braeden Cootes? And what are your thoughts that his prospect profile, comparable impact-wise, is in the realm of a Stankoven, a Catton, a Danielson, or a Guenther? thoughts in the comment section below about Braeden Cootes and the way he has developed. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.